I'll tell you the reason that I love this movie, and I think it's pretty genius, is because it's incredibly creative. Okay. The music is phenomenal. Within 10 minutes of watching this movie the first time, I downloaded the soundtrack within 10 minutes. And most of it is vocal work. It's pretty wonderful. Okay. I think both actors, both Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe completely slaughtered this. I think it was phenomenal. What they did, especially Daniel Radcliffe having to be mostly dead, that is something special. Okay. So I was very, very impressed by that. But the number one reason that I think this is a genius movie is because all of the commentaries that this movie kind of covers in an hour and a half. Okay. So let me ask you, before I get into my pieces, what kind of things do you feel like they had some level of commentary on through the movie? Whether it was a tiny piece, something they said, a huge piece, what do you think were some of the points that they were trying to talk about? Loneliness, isolation, friendship, fear, connection, fear of rejection, loving themselves, expectations, anxiety, self-doubt, how to be comfortable with yourself, be happy with what you have, emotional abuse, fear of judgment, societal expectations, living in daydreams versus taking action. A lot of good answers. Depression, the fun little voices in our head, self-worth. Okay. Yeah. Mixed emotions. Maybe depending on somebody else, maybe what we have inside of us versus how much we think we need help from others. I don't think that it's one or the other. I think it's probably a hybrid of both. Grief. Okay. Bullying. Yeah. They brought human existence down to its bare bones. We're sacks of bones and skin and gas, and society adds on so much more. Yeah, and I agree with Perry, Jimmy. With things like this, there's not really a getting it right. It's how you see it, right? So the reason that I wanted to do this, especially with this, was because I knew this was a much smaller movie that most of you had not seen before. So the experiment part of it was a reverse reaction. Yes, cool. We did something that not a lot of people do. But with that, it's really a matter of, how do you all interpret the pieces that make this piece of content up versus how do I enter? That's pretty much how all these reactions go, right? So there is no right or wrong answer. It's literally interpretation. And even if you watch a movie like this that is incredibly layered, incredibly complex, with so many nuances that none of us will get all of them, if you still watch it and go, okay, well, he was lonely, and then he wasn't lonely because he found this guy and he poured himself into him and he made a friend. Like, there's something to be learned there. There's a lesson there somewhere. And then if that's your level of interpretation, that's what your level of, there's no wrong answer, right? So my notes, as you can see, are all over the place. Just like this movie, all over the place. There's a couple things I want to hit on. First, now this is not always the case, but how many of you were here for the entire viewing, from the very beginning until we took the vote? Yeah, probably a lot of you. Okay. Here's something I think is interesting. Now that we're all reactors, I'm going to let you in on some secrets, okay? I'm going to give you some info. One thing that I always find interesting is ways that people will very creatively, what's the word? There's ways that people will very creatively demonstrate or announce their values. Okay. How many people, and again, this is not always the case. So not everybody that left during the movie was trying to say something about their values or X, Y, and Z. But did you notice how many people left and had to announce that they were leaving? Specifically at a time in the movie, they had to announce, I'm out. You notice that? Interesting, right? So here's why I commented, because we see that pretty often, but I generally chalk that up to, because we're a community and you recognize each other, it's more like people are just saying, hey, I got things to do, I can't stay, I just wanted to say hi, and then I say bye. Very different. Tonight, with this movie specifically, and a lot of the commentary and the ways that they did things, it makes people uncomfortable. It is supposed to make you uncomfortable. It made me uncomfortable because I forgot half that goofy shit that was in the movie. I remembered how I felt. I could not remember why I felt that way. Now I do. Daniel's special compass. Awkward, right? So, all that to say, I will disclaimer this with, this is all my opinion and my theories on the movie, okay? Just like you have. But I do think it's interesting that there were enough people that it was noticeable that kind of had to announce at specific parts, and then they disappeared, right? But part of what I think this movie is trying to do and say is that this is kind of what happens with us. Right? On one level, there's pieces of us that find ourselves incredibly lonely and incredibly isolated. For whatever the reasons and variables are, we have this side of us that will either sometimes seek loneliness, and then sometimes that loneliness is kind of what deteriorates us faster. So we seek some level of connection. Sometimes that level of connection can be just phone calls, and that suffices. Or sometimes it's you need physical connection, or whatever the case is, but it's a very broad spectrum. Okay. But I think the movie is really trying to make us uncomfortable in certain ways. And as Joy says, good art can make you uncomfortable. Absolutely. So the commentaries, let's think about this. And I want to hit on some very specific moments in the film that if you watch this from the beginning, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. But I also want to explain, or at least want to theorize on why they did what they did, how they did it. Okay. So I'm going to ask you, because this is a little bit of a quiz now, just this one question for now. How did the movie start? We had some stuff floating in the water. They kind of set the scene. But what was the initial first scene that made us go, whoa, okay, here we are? Hank was about to say goodbye. Okay, so Hank had the rope. He's on the cooler. He's at the ocean. He's going to say goodbye. That's how it starts. That is a very significant way to get you to pay attention. To immediately go like, whoa, 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 I got questions. How did we get here? Now, a lot of this will be subtextual, but I think that that's kind of the point, to make you pay attention. Because for you to, like, as a human, to look at another human doing this, you kind of have to ask, how did you get here? Right? So I think there's something really powerful about that. Yeah, it sets the tone. But us as viewers, like, it kind of puts the onus on us to go, well, wait a second. Like, this is generally how movies end, or there's like a point somewhere down the road, but we have all the information. We don't have that information. Okay. Yeah, it started with help me. That's right. So from there, we discover Manny. And I will tell you this. In the scheme of things, one of the main reasons I really love the messaging of this film is, at its core, and Jimmy, this might help you. I think that the general theme of this, and why I love it, is that Hank starts the movie. Hank over here, right there. Hank starts the movie wanting to say goodbye to life. And then we spend the entire movie, Hank explaining to Manny, the dead guy, why life is worth living. Okay? The onus goes on to, the hell's his name again? Not Manny. Hank. The onus goes on to Hank to explain in all of these details what is life. What makes us human? What makes us alive? So he has to take away he tries to take away all of the curtains and like confusion and like, okay, well, society says, well, you can't do that. Well, why can't you do that? Because you're not supposed to. But why? And just like a 2-year-old, you kind of have to explain why. And at the core of all of this is going through those different layers of why things are the way they are. Now, it's easy enough to kind of wrap this up and say, well, that's just what society does, and that's the way things are formed. And that's true, but that also becomes trickier when you deal with other cultures. Because in one area of the world, this is what society says and does. This is the culture. You take that same thing, you put it over here, that shit does not work. It's a different society. But there are relatively general strands and threads that kind of stay consistent for the most part through most of these societies and cultures. And to me, that is the kind of threads that we're running through this movie, what it means to be a person, what it means to be alive, and what life is like living. Okay. So I think the brilliance of this is watching Hank go from a place of no hope to, this is why life is worth living. I'm going to show you. Okay. So now if we go from this point where Hank has no hope, he meets Manny. Then there is this crazy scene riding a farting Harold Potter across the water. Okay? It's pretty ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. And that is usually enough for most of us to be like, what the fart am I? This is crazy. This ain't for me. Click, and then we turn it off. Okay? Now, I want you to think about this. There was a lot of farting in this movie. A lot of farting, okay? But think about the people that would turn off the movie at that scene and then not see what 89% of you said was a good movie, okay? Yeah, almost totally get it. Totally get it. And I do have to agree with Natty that I think the point is that it's ridiculous, okay? Because this movie, to me, has several points to where it will literally undulate between silly and cringe and awkward and uncomfortable to calm and wholesome and wonderful. And then all of a sudden, cringe, awkward, silly, ridiculous. Kind of like the way that life tends to be. Okay? It's absolutely intentionally dumb. Yeah, exactly. It's a repetition of life. Strangely fascinating. Yeah. So now here's what I think is clever. And this is why I was watching chat so carefully. When we start to get into some of the more nuanced messaging of what Hank has to explain to Manny, you notice that there's a slight escalation in the cringe factor. For example, we go from like the farting jet ski scene, fine. Lots of farts. He's climbing up up the hill in the jungle, and it's just a stream of farts. And you're like, okay, bro, I get it. Like you're farting. Okay, got it. But you're still like, okay, I got to push through this. I got to get through this. There's got to be more to this. When we get into the cave, okay, we get into the cave. What throws everybody off, and we even got a couple yikes in chat, is when Hank suddenly and unbeknownst to him turns into his father and drops the R word on Manny. That kind of makes everybody go, okay. Now what do I do? It's super uncomfortable, right? But then how do they explain it? Why did that happen? Does anybody remember why that happened? Why did Hank just blurt that out on top of Manny? Yeah, it catches you off guard for sure because of his father, right? So that explains this commentary on how we treat each other ends up becoming potentially how we treat others. So like, for instance, Hank's father said these things to him and treated him this way. And now it's going to be on Hank. Does he repeat that pattern or does he change? Does he break the thread? Right? It's his father called him that. And we see that. And there's this brief moment where he just blah, and he's like, ooh. And then he doesn't even realize it until Manny repeats it. And he goes, no, don't say that. It's not right. You can't say that. But here's the point of this scene. Beyond, so you've got the generational trauma. You've got the fact that we will say these things that are like inappropriate and bad and mean. And then do we continue that thread or do we break that thread? How do we resolve all that? But also, it's this incredibly poignant point of pacing in the movie where we're going to go and we're going to uptick the discomfort significantly. Right? Let's see what they do. Now we'll explain it, but see what they do. So if you think about this, there were several moments in here where it got super uncomfortable. Super uncomfortable. Now, yes, it's it's very subtle with like special compasses and talks of self-pleasure and all that goofy stuff. But take away the silliness and discomfort of it and think about what they're trying to say, right? Manny is as primal as it gets. Right? The DNA of a person, like this is Manny. And you have to explain, hold on, you can't do that on a first date. But you have to get past that discomfort. You should be able to discuss this type of thing with other people or this type of thing with your family or your friends. They even start to circle back when Hank starts to say, well, if my best friend can't fart in front of me, what else is he hiding? Like, that's a goofy thought, but it's also really, really interesting. It's it's very thought-provoking. It's very fascinating. Yes, there is a blanket of nonsense and silly on top of it, but you kind of have to like brush that away and say, okay, what am I actually looking at? And I do like to think that, all the goofiness that we do, like, yeah, we have our fart skis and our goofy talks, but like at the end of the day, there's something kind of pure to what we're doing. That's how I see it. It's very deep. So from that moment in the cave where Hank drops the R word, Manny repeats it. And there's a couple times where they use that. Now that they've established that that's a way they can uptick your discomfort, they use that very strategically through the film to once again make you go and up it. Make you feel that discomfort again, but also bring back the point of like, no, you don't say that. Stop. Because those types of things that are our generational trauma and the things that we have kind of battled against to get to where we are, they're always a part of us. They're always battles that we will have to face, right? So it's a way for the movie to remind us that these are the struggles that are always kind of, they're going to be kind of part of our shadow. And we have to acknowledge that. After that moment is when we get more of the regurgitation from Hank, the harmful words that his dad said that Manny starts to repeat. And then Manny comes out with like, oh, well, nobody loves you and you're going to die alone. And it's like, ooh. These awkward and uncomfortable moments. But there is this escalation of depth from the moment we get into the cave, and we break it up with the goofiness of like the water fountain coming out of his mouth and ridiculous stuff. That is very fun to make a movie like that. And again, props to Daniel Radcliffe for having to act the way that he did, like micro acting through all of this nonsense. Pretty incredible. But there are so many moments in the movie that make you want to look away. They make you uncomfortable. And they're generally like, it's almost like they picked 3 to 5 things that we're just not really supposed to be talking about, generally speaking. And they use those as these switches to make you go, ooh, I'm uncomfortable. Okay, how do I deal with this? And you kind of have to sit in the discomfort to get to the resolution. Now, the weird part about this, not weird, the whole friggin' thing is weird, but how often now do we, on a daily basis, find ourselves hitting that point of discomfort and then immediately just, I'm gone, and then and we're gone. That's it. We don't face discomfort as much as we used to. It's very easy just to like mute and block and ignore. Don't pick up the phone. Don't respond. You know what I mean? Like it's so easy nowadays to kind of build these echo chambers that we live in, and all we're getting is just our own words and our own thoughts. Now, I do think there is something to be said for finding your community. I understand that. But I think that once you start kind of blocking out the rest of the world, that is dangerous. That creates factions. The fact that they had to kind of face head on these very uncomfortable conversations and topics, it's a very goofy yet drastic way to me that it kind of shows us, like, I don't know if this is something that we do much anymore. You know? I think growth happens outside of your comfort zone. I don't know if that's like a t-shirt or something, but it does make sense. Now, I always think in metaphors and analogies, and this is something that I always go back to. If you take a person that has grown up and lived their life. Now, actually, I have to take the internet out of it, okay? So forget that the internet is a thing. You take someone that has grown up in their town, and from the moment they're born till the moment they die, they never leave that town. They never even leave the town, the village, like literally it's just that spot. Those are all the people they know. That's their whole life. And I want you to kind of just like make an absolute generalization to the level of thought or the level of understanding and empathy that they might have as a person walking around. Okay. Now you take that's standard A. And then you take the next person, same situation, but it's their state. Okay. and that's B. And then you can extrapolate this and keep going until you have somebody that spends this much time in this country, and then a year in this country, and then a year in this country. And they travel the world and experience other people, other cultures, other factions, other lines of thinking that are outside how they were brought up or raised or whatever. So they kind of become a sponge for experience and other ways and philosophies, right? So the point I'm trying to make with that is that it's very easy for us to kind of live in this bubble and take the things that make us comfortable and that we love so much and just kind of live there. It's safe. It's easy. But there's no growth. There's no learning. This is your whole world. Now, because we have the internet, in my opinion, I don't want to get off on a complete tangent about the internet, but the internet can be great and it can be terrible because yes, we have access to people all over the world, but then it comes down to us and like, okay, well, how are we consuming all of this, right? So let's just push that off to the side. But the point of all of that is the way that Hank has to describe all of this on being a human and what's okay and what's not okay. What are the rules? So tricky. But he has to give him something. I think this movie is a great visual example of us as people every day literally doing the best we can with what we've got. Hank has the Swiss Army man, Manny. And this cat can fart like a jet ski and he can shoot stuff out of his mouth. He's a water fountain. He's got a magic compass wiener. Like he does everything. And it's goofy, but he's literally doing the best he can with what he's got. Right? So, rules of life, what's appropriate. Manny's primal. There was a part of one of the songs where the lyrics were literally everything everywhere matters to everything. I think that is one of the points of the movie. Everything everywhere matters to everything. They show us that through the relationship of the two of them. And then even from the very beginning where we see the boat, we see the help me, I'm so bored, I'm so lonely, and all the ways that we kind of weave in and out of the story. I think there's, and you can agree or disagree here, but I think it's important because there seem to be so many questions. In my opinion, Manny was real. Okay, so if we go to the part towards the end where we have this scene with the ambulance and all that, Manny was real, but he was dead the entire time. Okay? This is Hank. It's always been Hank. This is Manny. But Manny was never alive. He was never coming alive. But Hank had to kind of process everything through Manny. Now, I do think that, yes, there is like, I think, who was it? It might have been Alicia talking about the psychological break that's happening. I do think that's the case. I think there's some level of psychological break, psychosis that Hank is going through. And the reason I say that is only because, like, yes, he's running around with a dead body. Like, I get that. But what really confirmed that for me, and not that he's like on LSD or anything crazy, was when the cameraman saw him for the interview and he was like, "Hey, do I know you? You look familiar." So what that tells me is I think Hank has gone through this before. He's been seen snooping around somewhere, like he's been on the news. Something's up where something like this is not a dead body per se, but that the camera guy recognizes. So this is a local thing maybe, right? I don't know if that's the case, but I do think that one piece to me kind of confirms that Hank has been sick for a while. That's what I think. I don't know if that's right or wrong. I could be way off, but that's my opinion. But Manny is absolutely real. And you notice from the time they get into the yard where the little girl is there, Manny is dead. Yes, he talks to Hank, but even Manny says, did you see the way that she looked at me? Talking about Sarah when she comes out. See the way she looked at me? Like I wasn't even there. Well, it's because he's dead, right? I thought there was a moment where when she stepped out of the house, she recognized Hank as if like he was her stalker, but they didn't imply that. I thought it was a facial expression. It was not. They would have put some kind of confirmation, but she was too kind to him to recognize him as a stalker. Okay. Yep. Where's that? Who's that? The reason Manny carried him to her house is Hank wanted to deflect the blame like he wasn't the one that went there. I think that's pretty good. And I also think, well, if you watch this and go, wait a second, Manny can't be dead the whole time. He carried Hank on his back to go up to the house. Yeah, but are you also going to say like he farted as a jet ski across the water and then he set himself on fire and they shot 55 feet in the air and fought a bear? Like it's all up here in Hank's mind, all of it. Okay. And I do think the diversion of blame is really spot on. It's all mental. It's all in his mind, which also kind of brings us back to the point of it started here. Right? It started here with whoops. Nope, not Imperium. It started in the beginning with Hank by himself. And now that you understand the whole trajectory of the story, you understand that it was in Hank the whole time. So us as humans, with our imagination, with our intelligence, the way that we have, as they say in the movie, thoughts, that's a thought, that's a thought, that's a thought, that's a good thought, that's a bad thought. We are pretty powerful beings. I mean, not to sound sci-fi, but we are pretty incredible. And as I've said before, I love this quote. I think it's brilliant. We are the part of the universe that can feel. I think this movie is a really clever way to demonstrate that, especially someone that supposedly has no hope, or we think has no hope. But as it turns out, it was just that one little thing. And they even say this in the movie. This is one little thing that made me go, oh, there's something there. Oh, there's something there. You know? And that's something that Hank talks about. I've been through this before, and every time there's this one little thing, this one little thought that makes me go, ooh, maybe I'll try that. Ooh, maybe I'll try that. I think that's super interesting. I think it's interesting. There's a part where on the bus, Hank is trying to explain the whole relationship and flirting thing to Manny, and Manny says all of a sudden, "Oh, because nobody loves you." And there's a moment of pause. And we're waiting for Hank to react. We're waiting for that to hit Hank like a sledgehammer and then just blow a gasket. But he stops. It goes on just long enough for us to think, here it comes. And then the twist that happens in that moment is instead of him reacting and taking it out on Manny, he then focuses his energy on helping Manny. And then starts to explain like the flirting and what you do, what you don't do. It's a really interesting moment. Yeah, we had to sit with that moment of discomfort, but it also was a good visual example of if somebody says something that hurts us, that cuts us deep, that's 50%. The other 50% is how we react to that, how we respond to that. Now, it might necessarily, like, it might really cut us deep, but then do we internalize that and kind of deal with it on our own? Or do we then externalize it, shoot it back at that person, and now there's twice the amount of damage going out? You know what I mean? Isn't that Hank's thought? It is. It is. But you notice everything that is Manny delivered is origined from Hank, right? But he still has to process it, because even though, like, Manny is another entity, kind of, not really, but I mean, how many times have you been sitting with your own thoughts and you end up in a spiral, even though they're your own thoughts? It's all in here. It's all self-enclosed, but you end up, and it's just a big, crazy spiral, right? Because it's all in us. So let me ask you this. A lot of different points of discomfort, a lot of goofiness, a lot of silliness. What do you think the point? If this movie has you walk away with a message, what do you think that message is? Again, no right or wrong answers. Your interpretation, what do you think the message would be? Or better yet, how did you interpret the message? Alicia, I actually do want to go back to that. Connect with others, self-acceptance. The way you talk to yourself matters. Keep going, keep fighting, survive. Good answers. All good answers. No one is perfect or has life figured out, but it's up to us to be our best self. Survival. Be weird, be yourself. You listen to your internal monologue more than you think, so be kind. That's a good one. Yep, all really good stuff. Ooh, you have to work through the uncomfortable things in life. I really love that. Jimmy, you still overthinking? That's all right, buddy. It's a good movie to do that with. That we have to learn to be comfortable with the uncomfortable parts of ourselves before we can truly shine. And then, of course, free the fart. Freedom for farts is the whole point. That's all it is. It's all nonsense. I made it all up. It's just about farts. I just wanted you to be comfortable farting in front of me because we're good friends. We're all just trying to live. Yeah. Ooh, that's a good one, Iggy. Once in a while, even dead inside can start to feel alive again and wish to live again. Yeah. No one has life figured it out. Yep. It's good. So I do actually, I remember kind of jotting this down, and Alicia just reminded me. There was a line in the movie. Where is it? Talked about the, can we talk about the before the internet every girl was a lot more special comment? I'm curious what others think. It brought up lots of thoughts for me. Example, feminism, social media validation, unfettered access to others. That's a really good one. So again, without like completely sidetracking off to like the internet per se, what are your thoughts on that one specific line that says before the internet every girl was a bit more special? I think that's pretty interesting. You agree with that? Okay, it's true. I took that to mean more like the internet makes everything more accessible. Yep. Yeah, that one stuck with you. Yeah, I felt the same way. There was a lot less to compare yourself and others to, or at least the idea is true. I agree with it. Okay. So I think that the fact, because I do think there's a level of kind of The same way the movie uses silliness and goofiness with farts and special compasses and all that. Like I think there's also a layer here. I do think what they were trying to say was before the internet, every girl was a bit more special. I think that's true of what they're trying to say, but is it just women? Right? I mean, I'm saying it's not just about men. My thought is with where you guys are going, which is the internet is a very easy place to make things not real. And this goes back to our initial question where somebody answered, I think the movie's about expectations. And I do think that's part of it too. There's all these expectations that we get from so many things. And the internet creates a very, very different level of expectation. And the hardest part of that for us to kind of navigate, whether it's intellectually or emotionally, is that we don't know what's real. We don't know if this person I'm looking at is real. But then it's not just about like Instagram. Well, this is your Finsta, this is your Rinsta, and this is your real life. No, it's not, because I've seen your house. That's not your house. It's not your car. That's not like you, whatever. That's just like the basic layer that everybody sees. The fact that we don't know if the information that we're getting is real. We're just bombarded by so much. Some of that is information, some of it is expectations of other people. Some of that is what we think is the person we're looking for. So we swipe, and we start to just like categorize people in just like box. Okay, nope, not for me, not for me, not for me. Yeah, it's nuts. So I think going back to that line of like before the internet, every girl was a bit more special because we kind of had to get to know people. We had to sit down and like learn somebody and then decide, are we vibing? Am I vibing with this person? It took effort for you to know. You know, it's like you go to school with people when you're younger. You might not be sitting down and kind of talking to somebody, but you're around people. You kind of learn personalities. There's effort that goes into it. And then sometimes somebody surprises you, go like, I didn't think that I liked Stephanie, but she's pretty freaking funny. I want to hang out with her. But you wouldn't have known that if you were just like, no. And you have this this unrealistic expectation of what the person you're going to be with or hang out with or whatever is going to be XYZ, right? Conversation rooted in attraction. I do think people have changed how they look at potential partners with the internet. I absolutely agree, Aaron. Absolutely agree. More on the person rather than the women. You're the one categorizing them and reducing them to this box. Agreed. If you tried to get to know them, it would be different and you would see how they are. I absolutely agree. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, having to deal with the people themselves instead of just taking the general little bite-sized info from their profile, the bio, and then just being like, no, it does, like, real life doesn't work that way. And if you think about how many of us complain about feeling isolated and feeling like we don't have a connection because the world around us is like building itself up to be like some of you were saying, beep, boop, boop, and that, and we're trying to keep up. And it's just, I don't think it's just how we're supposed to be. I don't think it's how we're supposed to function. So it's really hard to navigate. I don't agree with Hank's line specifically, but I do agree with this conversation as a whole. Yeah, and I do think, though, I don't think that, like, if we look at Hank's line very literally, I don't think Hank is necessarily saying that every girl was more special. It was that each girl that we interacted with felt more special to us because it took effort. It wasn't just a picture on a screen, a picture on a screen. He's not saying that they're not special. They're just not special to him. They don't mean anything to him. The girls before the internet were girls that were right in front of us, people that we had to interact with. And even if we weren't like digging each other's chili, it was still somebody like, oh yeah, I know that person. Yeah, they're fine. They're a nice person. Whatever. So, but yeah, you think about that conversation. That's a whole conversation that we have, or that we've just had, based on that one line of the movie. That one line. And we know that there's all these commentaries across the movie, whether it's about life and what it means to be a human, what it means to be good to one another, what it means to have generational trauma, explaining love and relationships to somebody that can't quite get it. It's super deep. It's super meta. It's very layered. I think it's really, really brilliant. But yeah, he could make up stories about the girls in the magazine. Yeah. Mm-hmm. To let people know the real you versus a profile where you put out just the bits that you want to show. Yeah. Interesting. I do think, yeah, I think it's an A24 movie. I think you're right. And yeah, oh, it is. Yeah, A24 Studio. You can still make up stories in your head from a photo or a video. You're absolutely right. And one of the things that I've talked about before when we talk about relationships and stuff, which we don't do a lot of, but it's come up before in all of the conversations we've had, is that we have to be super careful of, like, I know in my head, like, I have a type of person, okay? Thick with 4 C's. No, but seriously, like, I have a type of person that I'm attracted to. Not just physically, but like emotionally, intellectually. I have a type. If I meet somebody and they trigger one of those little pieces of the puzzle that make up my type, and I'm like, oh, hello, immediately my brain is going to take that one little piece and go, check, and automatically assume that everything else, all those other pieces, are check, 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 check. No, that's not how it works. No. It's so easy to just project all of those things that we want to see in a person onto them and assume that's how it is. No. And I feel like that's something you don't really understand. Most people don't understand, don't experience that until they actually go through it and realize, how did I end up with that person? Well, that's how. You filled in the gaps instead of them doing it for you. And that's no different than Hank and Manny making up stories for the girls that are on the phone or the magazine. Yep. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot. It is deep. But you notice we had to sit through the discomfort. We had to sit through the awkwardness and the conversations that you're like, oh God, I can't believe I'm sitting here right now. I mean, that's what I was thinking. You probably were not, but you also kind of were, because you were feeding off of me going, oh, that poor bastard just sitting there on camera right now. Oh my God. Yep. I was writing down awkward. Oh, this was a terrible idea. Must make sense of it all in the end. Special compass. Why is he flicking his wiener? Yeah, super weird. But I think that the point of it all is more important than the goofiness of what this movie presents. Right? Yep. I think it's worth sitting through the discomfort sometimes. Now, it doesn't mean that every uncomfortable conversation or every time you put yourself out there and you're vulnerable or you face somebody from another faction that things are going to end up wonderful and like the end of a cartoon. No, but I do think it's important for us, me personally, I think it's important that as we're making this journey from start to finish, and we will have both of those things, all of us, like the movie shows us, that we do our best to grow. Being solidified in your thoughts of A through Z is something that we all have. But once you step outside of that town, you're going to realize that B was actually 4. And you're like, oh, huh. Okay, so I'm going to go over to this town. I'm going to go over to this state. And what's great to me is that I might have a 26-letter alphabet because I've experienced all these things. And you might have a 44-letter alphabet. And when we compare the two, they look super different. But, oh, your first one is A, mine too. That's cool. Oh, your 17th one is P. That's neat. Me too. Well, we can talk about A and P and nothing else ever matches up, but that's kind of neat. I don't know. That's kind of goofy, but I do have to admit though, and I'll kind of ride on what Afnan is saying. I think if this movie wasn't uncomfortable or awkward, the message wouldn't have been delivered the same way. I agree. However, I do have to wonder one thing that I have actually commented about with other music videos that we've watched. If the message is hidden away under a bunch of stuff that most people are not willing to go through, does that hurt the message? Right? I think that's an interesting commentary for something like this. I don't know if it's possible to do it another way, but I do think that it's a point worth at least examining. You know? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. But I think for those of us that sat through the discomfort, the weirdness, the silliness, the humor of it, I think whatever it was, 89% of us, 86% of us agreed it was worth sitting through the weirdness. Yeah. It's not going to be for everybody. And I think that's okay. Because the ones that it does resonate with, it feels important. And that message goes across everything, whether we're talking about movies, music videos, shows, series, dramas, whatever. Not everything is going to resonate with everybody, but when they do, there's a lot to be learned. There's a lot to be garnished from that. And then we take that, and just like you saw in the movie, this is how we pull it full circle. We take all of that, that becomes our experience, and then it's up to us to then say, hey, this is my experience. What's your experience? And that makes all of us just a little bit more human.